Morning, everyone. Welcome to our second workshop on the Power Up Community Sport Programme. This is governance structures, and we have James Lowbridge and Neil DaCosta here from Aston Villa Foundation, who are going to lead us through governance and structures. So, as usual, I will keep an eye on the chat. So if you've got any questions, put them in the chat as we're going, and I will keep an eye on that and jump in. Or at the top of your screen, if you can see the little hand, you can ping on the hand, and that will pop a hand up that James and Neil and I can see. And it's very clever. It does it in order, so it says hand 1, 2, and 3. So pop a hand up if you've got anything that you think, I must ask that. Now, or use the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with. So James and Neil, I'm going to hand over to you guys.
Thanks, Claire. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all surviving the thunderstorms in the region at the moment, but I think it's needed at the same time. We talked about it at the start. I think everyone's grass at home is going to be celebrating that there's a bit of rain. So, but yeah, it's would love to say it'd be a nice sunny day outside, but I actually quite enjoy the rain today. So hope everyone's surviving the thunderstorms and whatnot as well. Yeah, might just introduce myself. I'm James Lowbridge. I'm from the Aston Villa Foundation, Senior Programs Manager for Community Relations. Entering my 15th year of working within the football charitable world. And obviously work for the Aston Villa Foundation, who are the charitable arm of the football club. Been a charity for over a decade now, a community program for over 30 years, ultimately serving the community close to the football club and the wider reaches of Birmingham and where our fan base is, I guess. So I've got my colleague Neil on the call as well, who I will let him do his own introduction. So I'm going to hand you over to Neil.
Thank you, James. Good morning, everybody. So my name is Neil DaCosta. I'm the Relationships Manager for Aston Villa Foundation. I've been with the foundation for about 2 years now, and I support, the delivery, if you like, and the support of the multitude of programs that we deliver across numerous agendas. And prior to that, I had just under a 30-year career as a local government senior officer. So within that role, I supported many community organisations, very much like yourselves, who were delivering and who had different forms and structures in terms of governance. So I'm supporting James today in regards to any queries that may arise from the presentation that James is going to deliver. So great to see you all. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Neil. As I say, I'm pretty sure I've got about 3 screens at the moment. So if I'm looking in different directions, it's because I've got a lot of screens. So apologies if I'm looking off camera. But ultimately, I've got a presentation and a slide deck to show you all. And hopefully, you will come away from today of either learning something new or something, and hopefully take something away to support your organisation. And I'm not sitting here as the expert, complete expert on governance and structures, but hopefully, as I said, we can share some of the knowledge and experience between me and Neil that we can, hopefully, as I said, you can take away something today. So, yeah, so today's session's around governance structures, but just to make one thing clear from the offset, it's not going to turn everyone into a lawyer, accountant, or governance specialist either. Hopefully, as I said, it's just something where you can take something back to your organisation and may want to tweak or change something to future-proof your organisation and progress your organisation forward. Governance can be a bit boring, a bit of a dry subject, I'm not going to lie, but it can be exciting for some and very interesting as well. But the importance of governance is there. It gives you the foundations to grow with confidence in your organisation, and without good governance, you may not be able to fully progress your organisation forward. For example, acquire the funding or the funding streams that you need and want to acquire to grow your organisation and progress your organisation forward, as I mentioned. So again, hopefully at the end of this presentation and workshop, you'll be able to take something away. And as I said, this workshop isn't the end or be an end all. If you need any further support, I can't answer the questions today, or Neil can't answer the questions today, we've got an infrastructure at the foundation who'll be able to come and meet you guys in person, whether it's a one-to-one in person or on Teams, where we can provide that additional support across our organisation to your organisation. That's our commitment from today as well. I have got a presentation to show. Hopefully technology is not going to let me down, but you never know. If you give me 2 seconds, I'm going to try it and share my screen. Again, I'm working off multiple screens, so hopefully it's the right screen that's going to show. Please, Claire, maybe let me know if anyone can see the screen. Yep, I think I've got a few thumbs up. Fantastic. Hopefully now I can do the slideshow and that works as well. Has that worked at all? Is the slideshow popped up for everyone, or is it still on the same screen?
We can see the slideshow. We've got the slides down the side as well, but we can see the main slide as well.
Okay, that hasn't worked then, but I wanted to work. I'll try and keep it as that, then maybe if everyone can see it, okay. But I will share the slides to everyone at the end, and helpful links and any articles we've got in here. We will share it all on an email to you all afterwards. So don't sweat too much if you can't see the slides, or clearly we will send them on an email to you as well. So moving forward, hopefully that's great that you can see the slides. Just a question for you all before we start, and maybe that's something for the chat. What does governance mean to you as your organisation? What do you understand governance to be? And I'll give you a minute or two just to pop something in the chat if that's okay, to see where you all are at the moment. Again, I can't see the chat, Cass. I'm relying on you a little bit.
Yeah. So we've got legal stuff.
Yeah, do you remember when I took that? He was like, "Oh, you've got like all them boots and bikes, I like small pairs." And he's like, "Well, I took jump in and you take that." He was like, "Oh, you don't like it." Well, I'm a little.
Just got a couple of people joined. We've got Damon and Becky.
That's very good, isn't it?
Can I just ask if you could put yourselves on mute? We've got compliance and oversight, a set of rules to follow in your organisation. Rules to follow. Charity, we are a charity.
Yeah.
Well, I think that.
Sorry, I've just.
I'm back. So
Yes, you're back. Yes.
Brilliant. I think I can hear the chat pinging, so I've heard the pinging has stopped. So I'm assuming that's everyone so far. But before I move on to the slides, I think some really good answers there. But I want everyone to have a little think about before we get into the nitty gritty technical stuff. Just think about governance as a system. Your structure determines how you're constituted. Your governing document as your organisation determines what you're allowed to do. And I'll provide an example in a moment around what we've had to do at the foundation a decade ago. to change our governing document. Your board or committee provides oversight. Your policies determine how you operate. Your workforce delivers the work, of course, and your finances provide the resources. And that's all encompassed with risk management, which protects the organisation. So it's a system. So governance is all the above there, which ultimately makes sure breathes life into your organisation. So one big system. So if you've got all those things achieved, your purpose and the impact will follow from that as well. So the workshop today, again, I'm working on multiple screens. Hopefully this works if I click along. Yeah, so we're going to be looking through as everything I've just mentioned there as a system. So structures, the accountable objectives, your boards, board meetings, policies and procedures, workforce management, and as I said before, risk management as well. I don't want people to think risk management is just making your session safe on the ground. It's about risk managing your organisation as well. So one of the biggest mistakes organisations can make is assuming that structure they start automatically the structure, so they can have that forever. As soon as you put that structure in, you can't change it, or you can't change your governance document, etc. Organisations do grow. Your ambitions could change, which then means your funding could change and your workforce changes. So the simple question is, what structure are we at the moment, and what structure do you want to be in the future to achieve your ambitions and goals for your organisation? So is your current structure still right for where you want to be and what to achieve? So it's something to really think about. As we go along, we're going to talk about a little bit about self-assessments, take away from today. So down to think about as you go along, is how we're structured at the moment, is this where we need to be, or actually we need to change or move into a different direction to really meet the ambitions of the organisation? So going into the different structures of your organisation, and I think a lot of you on this call might be CICs or KICs. You might be a CIO or a registered charity. You might be an amateur sports club. So I think, Claire, I'm right, I think in saying there's probably a mix of everyone on this call today.
Yeah, we've got fantastic. One charity. Somebody said they're a charity. Yeah, a CIO. Yeah, a real mixture.
Fantastic. So looking to CICs or KICs, I always come CICs, but I do hear people come as KICs as well. Limited companies which operate to benefit the community they serve. We do a lot of work with KICs or CICs in the area in Birmingham currently, where we support them with small grants opportunities, or why we're here today in terms of governance support or capacity building support. We're doing that across a lot of our programs at the moment, and we do come across a lot of CICs in Birmingham, and they do some fantastic work as well. So the purpose of the CICs is primarily just a community benefit rather than a private profit. There's different types of CICs. They can be limited by guarantee, limited by shares. We've had to work with an organisation recently where they've had to change how they operated as a CIC. They set up wrong at the start. They set up as a limited by shares, which did limit the funding opportunities they did have. And a lot of funders do favour the limited by guarantee than limited by shares. You might know those who are CICs on this call. You obviously you have a compulsory asset lock, and you have to adhere to the annual CIC report, or form CIC 34 as it's called, and it must be filled alongside accounts per year as well. The pros and cons are there on the screen. So CICs are really easy to set up. They're less governance. You don't get an annual audit as you would as a charity. As I said, you have a submission with accounts with the CIC report per year. We don't have to do a full annual audit. Your directors can be paid or unpaid. So you can have directors who support because of they've got expertise in certain areas, or you get directors who are operating on the ground as well. Limited liability for directors, and profits can be distributed if a CIC is limited by shares, as I mentioned before, which again, it's a pro if you set up a CIC if that's how you want to operate, but also As I talk about the cons, it can limit the funding opportunities as well. Founders, as I said, can be employed by the CIC. So if it could be you have a small team, but the CIC director or the founders can be employed by the organisation directly. We have a lot of that in the city. We work with where we talk to the founder, but also the person who's delivering on the ground as well. And it's good if you founded the CIC and want to remain in control. So I'll talk about a little bit about charities in a moment, but once you become a charity, you have a board of trustees above you that would take that kind of control away from you. So if you want to kind of stay in control of your organisation, CIC is probably the best structure for you. But because of how you are operating for community benefit, you can convert to a charity, which then brings about additional pros and additional cons as well. But we'll go on to that in the other slides as well. The cons, there's more limitations in terms of grants and donations, as I mentioned before. You probably are relying on more small grants than you are on larger grants. Dividends to directors are capped. It's hard to attract that traditional investors. If you're a CIC, where if you want the big funding opportunities, when you go to a CIO or a charity, you are more inclined to or more attracted to funders for investment. You don't receive the same tax benefits as charities as well. So you are taxed a little bit different. Your tax relief is a little bit different if you are a charity. And you can't become an ordinary company as well. So I don't know, you in this room probably know this and probably know CICs better than I do, but say Neil and I are well versed into working with KICs or /CICs in the city at the moment. I'm just going to bring in my colleague Neil. Have I missed anything there in terms of CICs from your experience?
No, James, that's a fair summary. Again, I think the key is for organisations is just to be really, really clear on whether you want to remain control, if you like, in terms of your delivery, whether your directors, if you like, are going to receive direct payments, or whether your aims and objectives are charitable. If they are charitable, and it's more appropriate in terms of some of the opportunities and that charities will afford, which James will go on to later. There have been instances where organisations have started off as a CIC, but then have decided to seek charitable status just because of the nature of the organisation, and also to look at other opportunities that charities afford. So again, that's the main kind of consideration really in terms of CICs, or also considering whether you want to change to a charitable incorporated organisation or a charity. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Neil. Moving on to a charity. It's a little bit slow, the slides, but hopefully they catch up quickly on your end as well. A charity in England and Wales is an organisation that is established for charitable purposes only. They're set up for public benefit. It could be an unincorporated entity, a charitable company, or another structure, and its governance administration depends on its form. So, as I said, it exists for charitable purposes, public benefit. There's significant advantages around funding, gift aid, tax treatment, but there's also increased responsibilities, reporting, and scrutiny as well. So if I run through the pros, I say it's great. It's more fundable. It's wide access to grants. Gift aid, if you ever want to explore gift aid, our fundraising team at the foundation would probably relish the opportunity to have a chat with you around that and talk to you about the benefits of gift aid on donations to your organisation. I think it's about 20p to £1, but I might be wrong. It may have changed. But if you ever want to have a conversation with us around that and wider kind of fundraising and donations into your organisation, please let us know, because we'd love to have a conversation how we can support you and share good practice from our end. As I said before, business rate relief and exemption from corporation tax, where CICs wouldn't be. There's strict reporting on and accounting standards, which it does equal to transparency and public trust, though. So it goes on the charitable website, charity house, and it's there, but actually that provides transparency and trust with funders that actually you aren't hiding anything. It's all out there in the open, and people can see with complete transparency how you operate as an organisation. and that just brings about a lot of trust, and the funders will check. They will go on the Charitable Commission, Companies House, they'll whatever it might be in terms of checking your organisation. But actually, because of the strict reporting and the transparency, it does help with providing that big picture to the funders. As cons, as I said, it's much as it brings the pros, there's a lot more work. As a charity, you are having to adhere to stricter processes and reporting and accounting standards. There's more governance and scrutiny. They have to be registered with Companies House. Trustees may be personally liable, depending on the member arts as well. Individuals, as I mentioned before, have less control. It is more kind of evolved upwards to a board of trustees. So the as a CIC, when it's something you've created from scratch and you want that control, the CIC would allow to that. Where charity, you have to depend on the leadership and direction from the trustees, and you have to manage upwards as well. And obviously, it's hard to justify paying trustees and directors. That's something we'll speak about further along as well when we talk about your board. Moving on to a CIO, it combines kind of charitable status with an incorporated legal structure. It's relatively new in its lifespan. It's more modern, simplified structure for charitable organisations. You are seen as a recognised charity, and like other incorporated organisations, it has its own legal entity, so can enter into contracts, own property, can be held liable, and there's few reporting requirements than a standard charity. You are regulated by the Charity Commission, but not by Companies House. Well, obviously, in a charity, you'd have to do both. And overall, it's more straightforward in governance and a legal framework. So, if you want to make that next step into a charity from a kick, maybe CIO is something to explore. If you're not quite ready to make that step into a charity, some of you on this call might be something a bit different. So you might not be a CIO, CIC, or a charity. You might be a company limited by guarantee, which is commonly used for not-for-profit organisations. They don't have shareholders or receive dividends. So typically set for social and charitable community purposes, and liability of members is limited to, I think it's £100. Might be wrong, it might have changed as well, but last time I checked it was £1. You could be a community amateur sports club. So you benefit from tax relief like gift aid and business rates, but you must be organised on an amateur basis. So it works well for those clubs operating on an amateur basis and provide that the tax relief, but also it's you haven't got paid employees. It's amateur. So that's a little bit different to it's very more reliant on volunteers and support, and the funding probably goes towards capital costs or wider costs for the sports club rather than paying employees as such. And you could be a constituted community group. So it's more formalised structure for community group, recognised as a formal entity. You can apply for funding, although likely limited to smaller amounts again that you'll get if you was a CIC or a charity or CIO. Appreciate there's a bit of a whistle stop tour there. They may have thrown a lot at you. Hopefully it does resonate with you in this room, or actually you may have learned a little bit about the different structures. And again, these slides will be shared, and we will have opportunity off this call if needs be to go into deeper conversations as well. But some self-assessment really. It's for yourself to have a little think about, not to kind of answer on this call now, but something to take away or write within your kind of notes at the moment. Just consider whether your structure is still relevant to your services that you're delivering currently, and how much control you wish to maintain. So some key questions is, how much control of your organisation do you want to maintain? What's your current ambitions or future ambitions? If you want to go for larger scale grants, you may wish to consider having charitable status, which then opens the doors to more opportunities. Would you pass the public benefit test that comes with that? But ultimately, it's a costly exercise to convert with legal. So I really would seek out legal and financial advice, albeit it might be a cost in the short term, but the short term pain could be a long term gain to really get the structure right for your organisation to move forward. So we aren't here providing that legal and financial advice today. We're just trying to provide advice about different structures and the governance as a whole. But if you really want to kind of progress your organisation away from where you currently are, I really would recommend sorting out or seeking out legal and financial advice in the near future. I don't think there's been any questions yet, Claire. I don't think so. We'll move on to we won't give too much time. I will let you have a little bit of a think about it as we go along. In terms of your structure, I won't do it as a task as such and put it in the chat. So it's more about your self-assessment and something you want to keep to yourself potentially as well. But if you do want any questions, myself and Neil are here if you want to ask anything. So hand up, Claire.
Yeah, just if people haven't seen, Neil's popped in the chat the public benefit test, the gov.uk link. So have a little look at that link. And if there's any questions on that bit, stick your hand up.
Thanks, Claire. I'll move on to your governing document. As I mentioned it previously in the call, every organisation should have a governing document. Depending on the structure, that might be a constitution, a memorandum, an articles of association, or another governing document. Think of it as a rule book for your organisation. It tells you who you are, what you do, what you dare to do, and how you're supposed to operate. An example of the Aston Villa Foundation, when our head of foundation, who's now our community director of social impact for the football club, came into post over 10 years ago. In our governing document, we said we would work with just young people. So before we wanted to expand our operation and work with adults or vulnerable adults, we needed to change our governing document to do so, because if we wouldn't have been legally legally we say we're only working with young people, we needed to change so if we can actually legally work with older people in our communities. So that was something that we had to quickly change ourselves after a self-assessment from our side to move our organisation forward, and that was over 10 years ago as such. So really make sure your governing document does say exactly what it says on the tin as such, that this is what we're going to do as an organisation. That's something to really reflect and review within your board meetings as well, which we'll move on to later in the call. So your legal documents would have objects, your purpose, what you're legally allowed to do. So you might be delivering sport, you might be delivering to adults or children, you might be delivering something completely different. But it should be self-explanatory. It should be in your governing document. And funders will look for that as well, because unfortunately, the nicest possible way, funders do look for ways not to fund you because they get oversubscribed. So if your governing document says we only doing this, and then you're applying for funding to say we're doing this, it's completely different. They will look at that, and that they will provide that as evidence and rationale as to why they won't fund you. So really get that watertight in your governing documents up to scratch, because they will be checked. You look at appointments in terms of how you're meeting as a board, your frequency of meetings. It looks into your financial rules, remuneration, which I could never say. If someone else can say it, then great. And looks at expenses as well. It also looks into your number of trustees, directors, or committee members in terms of lengths. We'll go on to your board and how your board should be structured, or advice on how your board should be structured further in the call, what funders look for as well. Many are written by solicitors, so it's something to really look into. If you are a new organisation looking for your first ever governing document, or your current document is a legal document. Neil, have I covered everything there from your side, you feel? I know you've had to deal with a lot of governing documents in the past.
Yeah, sure. So James, you have, but just to make the point that in terms of your objects, they're really important, because lots of CICs or charities may start off with specific objects, but if you look at how things change within society, or when you're delivering, it may be that your priorities might change, etc. It's really important that you review your objects to make sure that they're relevant. Also, in terms of the point that James made around funders, there are certain tests now, which you're probably aware of, most of you, but lots of funders, from a due diligence point of view, what they might do is check the Charities Commission or check Companies House to see where you are in terms of your filing. So in terms of being up to date on your filing requirements, it's really important because that may be an indicator as whether an organisation chooses to fund you or not. So it's really important that you make sure that your filing's up to date, and also you make sure that your objects or your aims and objectives of your organisation, that's clear as well, either on Companies House or on the Charities Commission. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Neil. So in summary, really, your governing document should tell you things like, again, what are your objectives, or objects, sorry, your objects, how your board members are appointed, how often your meetings happen, how decisions are made, can directors or trustees be paid? That have to be outlined in there. What expenses can be claimed, how many board members you should have. So you could have in your governing document, we've got this amount of board members and you've changed it, but actually your governing document says you should have this amount. So make sure that you are adhering to that. What happens if someone leaves? What happens if to your assets if the organisation closes as well? So it's a really important document as you try to strive to. So here's a bit of a challenge to you all on the call. Don't just own your governing documents. You need to fully understand it. And a lot of organisations just have a constitution that's sitting in a folder, a shared folder somewhere, or locked away in a folder somewhere. And very few, which we do a lot of conversations with organisations, very few really understand and know their document. It may be lifted from somewhere else. There's a lot of templates out there, and it's your badge is slapped on it, and that's it. But I really would recommend reviewing it and really understanding your governing document, because it's so important. So moving on to the next slide. And some self-assessment evaluation questions for yourself again. When was the last time you reviewed your governing document? Are your objects still relevant? You may have changed since it was done. It may have been done many, many years ago, but it may have been done recently, or you are keeping on top of it and you have reviewed it with your board. Could you be operating illegally if activity isn't aligned with your objects? So please don't get caught out if you are doing something different that's not outlined in your document. And it changes that needs to be approved. You need to write to the Charities Commission, or if you are a charity anyway, to change your objects. Not so sure, Neil, you might answer this one. If you're a CIC, and would that be, where would you kind of help? How would you change it? Where would you write to?
Yeah, so CICs, sometimes they operate slightly differently because it's down to the directors. But from some CICs, even though they're set up on Companies House and they may have 2 or more directors usually, some of them still have governing boards, or not trustees in the the kind of description from a charity point of view, but they report in to a board. But the important thing is just to make sure that you have your governing document, and you will have to submit a governing document in terms of from a CIC point of view. But separately to that, it's just to make sure that you have on a shared file, along with your policies and procedures, your aims and objectives in your governing document, which I think it's good practice on an annual basis to review that, and also to have version controls. And what a version control is that every year when you review it, there's some form of meeting that kind of reviews the fact that you've had a look at it, you've updated it, and you've also dated that as well. Later on in the presentation, James will also just highlight certain organisations where you can actually get some support, some further support in terms of governance, etc. as well, because I think that with CICs, for example, or small charity entities, sometimes having that additional support and guidance is really, really valuable. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Neil. Go back to funders, and their for the considerations here. Something they would look at, dissolution clause or asset lock found within your governing document. So what would happen if to finances if your organisation ceases? So they would look at that and go, well, if we're funding this organisation, what would happen if the organisation ceases? What would happen to that funding? So if it's not clear within your document, they may not fund you. you look at number of directors and trustees. So a good practice example is to have an odd number. So if there is a vote, it isn't a split or a split vote. We've had a few in the past that have applied funding to ourselves when we've had our small grants or program funding opportunities, where the number of directors has been 2, and they've been related as well, which it needs to be good practice to be unrelated and an odd number. So we always look for a minimum of 3 on the board to make that kind of split vote, or avoid having a split vote. Funds might think there's not enough scrutiny or safeguarding in place, or safeguards in place if there's enough on the board as well. So yeah, and also making sure you're not applying for funding that sits outside of your objects on your governing document, because that would just ultimately be a waste of time for a lot of funders who'd be wise to that and would look and reviewing your documents. And so please, again, review your document, learn it, and when you're looking for new future funding opportunities, make sure it adheres to your governing document. So, as Neil mentioned a little bit, in terms of good practice reviews per year, so have a structural review. So firstly, the CIC charity sale, what are you currently, are you actually structured correctly to where you want to be and match your ambitions? When was the last time you reviewed your governing document? When is it within your next board meeting, or could you make it part of your next board meeting? Do you need to review your objects in there if you want to change what you're delivering, or you need to change what you're delivering in the future? And then check your asset lock clause or your dissolution clause in there to make sure that if something does happen to the organisation, finances are kind of accounted for, and funders will look at that as well. Moving on to boards. I've lost my mouse now, typically. What's the purpose of your board? The simplest thing is the board's there to provide governance, oversight, and strategic direction. Yeah, board members, trustees, directors, committee, depending who you are and how you're operating. It should bring skills to the organisation that you might not have internally, providing that advice for in certain areas that you may want to grow into, you may want to deliver to, so whether that's health, whether that's education, whether that's sport. So we, as the Aston Villa Foundation, we do have trustees that have expertise in areas where we wouldn't have internally, and that's what really adds value to the organisation within our trustee meetings to aid growth and steer the foundation to the directions to achieve our strategy. Ensure legal compliance, it's for public benefit and for reporting purposes as well, to make sure that the board is in place for that. The board must always act as the best interest of your charity or CIC. It should never be a big conflict of interest within your board. It should never have the board trying to get money out of the organisation for their own purposes. It should always be for the best interest for your board. They should set the strategic vision for the organisation. This is where the roadmap for the foundation or your organisation should be heading towards. Financial and risk accountability is with your board as well, and they should be holding the management and leadership to account. The Sport England Governance Code is one to explore, because your boards should really hold their good practice anyway, is 9 years total on the board with a maximum of 3 terms over 3 years cycle. We're doing a current review of our trustees at the foundation at the moment, because they've been there a long time, all of our trustees, and we're doing a current review of that because they have reached that kind of threshold. It should be freshened up every 9 years in 3-year cycles. If you want more information about that, please Google, find the Sport England Governance Code. It'll be there for you to have a look at, and we will send it to you on an email as well, alongside the slides. So we're a bit of it again, as the common theme of this is a bit of self-assessment. So to review the board's responsibilities, strategy, finance, risk, compliance, accountability, oversight. They should be challenging the leadership and also supporting the leadership as well. Be interesting to see as a self-assessment for yourself what your board's currently is at the moment. And is there a question or no? Oh, okay.
No question. Sorry, it's just yeah, Neil's popped a couple of comments in the chat there, so no questions unless anybody wants to shout.
No problem. I thought there was I've heard a bit of noise, maybe it's in my office, it might be that as well. So the skills audit. So currently have a look at what you've got within your board and maybe do a skills audit. It can be really useful exercise. You may want to recruit new board members or trustees, and it'd be interesting to see what skills they bring to the table. So it could be financial, could be HR, could be legal, marketing, fundraising, safeguarding. We're living in a digital world now, maybe more digital focused. It could be that they're good for property or capital in the future. It could be commercial operations. Ultimately, it could be that they've got a lot of experience in community development as well. So it'd be really interesting task to have a look at what you might need as your organisation, maybe do a skills audit of your current board and actually what gaps there might be, where you may want to recruit in the future. Also important to note, will they be reliable? We all have been in meetings or steering groups or different meetings where so-and-so hasn't turned up again, or so-and-so, they'll get back to us on communication. It's really important that your board is trusting, reliable, and can offer their time to the organisation. And as I said before, we want to what benefits they're going to bring to the organisation, and also we don't want board members that will cause conflicts of interest as well. And that should always be a part of your board's meeting. Should always have a conflict of interest agenda or agenda item to make sure that the board isn't fulfilling its own purpose, or board members are fulfilling their own purposes rather than the organisations. As I say, it's more challenging. We've been there in the past with experience where it can be more challenging to deal with people or have people on the board who are serving their own agenda. So if you want some information about recruitment and induction processes, again, we'll pop some links in the either in the chat or in the email following this workshop today about the guidance from the charity commissions around recruitment and induction process for your board. So going to the next slide, but while I'll do so, it might be worth just having a little bit of a self-reflection on if you had a few board vacancies tomorrow, and what kind of skill would you want within your board? Again, if you're doing a bit of a self-assessment to yourself now on your own work and your own notes, please have a think about what does our organisation need to really progress our organisation forward, or actually make our organisation more safer and more secure as well. Cool. I don't know if Neil's popped some of these in the chat already, as I can't see the chat, but a bit of a sense check. If you want to look at role descriptions, chair, vice chair, safeguarding commitments, etc., NVCO website is really good for that. There's a link in this slides, but we'll pop it again on the email that follows today. Claire, you got your hand up, I think.
Yeah, just a comment from Jed at Cradley Heath, that he had quarterly meetings with his board. I think you've got a charity, haven't you, Jed? And recently taken on new members, a real opportunity to ensure compliancy and look at portfolio of the board for particular activities. Yeah, it's a good. It is just seeing those gaps, isn't it, Jed? Did you want to chip in?
Hi. Yeah, just very briefly, I was just about to type, we're a CIO as opposed to a CIC, so there's a very slight, there's a little bit of a difference in how you're set up, but the effect is pretty much the same. They actually employ me as their project leader, so I consider it part of my job to ensure that they know what their legal requirements are, and kind of keep them on their toes a bit. I see my job as very much to encourage them to come up with sort of like the bigger picture, and try and avoid micromanaging.
Fantastic, Jed. That's great that you have that support for the organisation, really. Yeah, and Neil, have you got anything to kind of comment on that at all? I think it's great that they've got involved, such as yourself, Jed, to do that within your CIO.
I would encourage everybody or anybody that's on the call that has similar ideas or experience that they can share to come forward, like Jed has. It's a great example of good practice where an organisation has the capacity to do this, because there are opportunities for different committees if you have enough trustees or board members to look at things like compliance, to look at things like the policies, etc. But I know that's not possible for all organisations represented. And it's interesting, I was just replying to Daisy, who is seeking new directors with specific skills. So sometimes organisations do struggle with recruiting specific individuals with specific skills if they don't have them. But what myself and James will do is undertake to see if we can find some information and some guidance on how organisations might want to approach that, because I think it's really important to make sure that you've got the necessary skills, to kind of help you with what you're seeking to deliver. Thank you, James.
James, there's just a question, and Neil, actually, just a question from Sarah about what the general view is regarding remuneration for meetings and attending meetings. Is voluntary standard practice with perhaps a lunch, or should there be a financial payment?
It's a really good question, and to be honest with you, that comes down to individual preference as such. A lot of a CIC where you have directors, there is an option where directors can be paid or unpaid. In terms of charities, CIOs, etc., there may be paid roles within that particular organisational setup, but again, it would just depend upon whether trustees or directors or representatives on your boards or committees are doing it on a voluntary basis, or whether the organisation's preference is to do that on a paid basis. When it comes to volunteering, there are some guidelines in regards to reasonable expenses and reimbursements on that basis. So again, what we'll do, we'll seek after the call to kind of send the general guidance, which might help you. But again, when you set up, it just depends, as I say, on the basis upon which the people that are supporting you, the roles that they're fulfilling, whether the decision is that they're paid or unpaid.
Well, thanks, Neil. I was going to mention expenses, so you've done it for me, so that's great. Moving back onto the slides, unless there's any other questions, Claire. So please, we'll send this link of the NC VO to you, which provides some really useful resources and templates. And ultimately, again, back to the sense check, making sure they understand the board, what their role is on the board. They don't know their legal responsibilities. I mentioned the skills audit before. Upon your recruitment or current reviews of your board, looking at performance reviews, again before, about keeping things fresh in your board, the term lengths, as I mentioned, about the Sport England guidance of 9 years and 3 times 3 terms. Conflict of interest, which I'll go on to in a moment as well. That's always been declared on your each board meeting and each board meeting and annual meetings as well. A lot of companies get unstuck with family members and relatives on the boards, because it becomes a little bit of a grey area where the companies will look for board members that are not related, and obviously the number of board members and the odd number is always a good practice as well, especially for charities. And then clear lines on what authorities delegate to the CEO or leader as well within the board. In terms of a typical structure of board meetings, it's always good practice to have, I always think, a 10-point I might be wrong. There might be things that Neil might do a little bit different as well, but might want to add to it. But 10 points, I think, of a typical structure of a meeting where you have your welcome, your apologies. Then I'll go to direct declarations of interest before you start the meeting properly. You review your previous minutes. You look at your governance and compliance, as we've talked about before. Look at finance. Look at where we are performance-wise in the strategy. You look at risk as we will go on to risk at the end as well. Any key decisions, and then any other business. There kind of should be your kind of standardised board meeting agenda items as such, or your structure for your board meetings. Again, think people might do something a little bit different, but I'd say that's probably standard practice, Neil. We, again, it's not on the slides, that kind of 10-point list, but I will pop it on an email or different slides for you all when we distribute this out to everyone via email. Conflict of interest, I've got recircled to that one. It's extremely serious. Imagine one of your trustees, I guess, or your board members owns a company away from your company and wants to tender for a contract within your organisation. How can they vote? Have a fair vote if they don't declare the interest at the start. And it's if you're just using board members' companies to pay them for that, it's got to be a huge conflict of interest. So it needs to be a clear progress. Make sure the interest is declared, record it, even remove the person from the discussions where appropriate in terms of if you have that sort of situation. Make sure the decision is independently made, and then again record what happens within the minutes as well. I know a lot of organisations have come unstuck with certain situations in the past as well. I think I've kind of moved into that a little bit. As I said, it should be held regularly. It should be within your kind of governance document how often your board meetings will meet. Make sure you circulate the board papers in advance to your board, so they're not just hearing everything beforehand. They maybe have time to prepare for the actions that will be raised within the meeting. It should always be about decisions and solutions, not necessarily just updates. As I said, we got the list in terms of finance, safeguarding, and risk as well. Again, make sure there's someone taking minutes. Again, there should always be kind of transparency of your board meetings. Some funders will, I've definitely seen it in ourselves, may ask for a submission of your minutes for your board as part of your funding application, and definitely required for auditing purposes as well. You may want to consider some subgroups or committees alongside your board that tackle certain issues. And ultimately, make sure there's a balance between governance and keeping your board informed of the activities that you do. And hopefully that 10-point kind of suggestion will help you structure those meetings to cover everything needed. Moving into financial management, the board ultimately has the responsibility for financial health of the organisation. Doesn't mean that every trustee needs to be an accountant, but every trustee should have enough to ask kind of sensible questions or sense check questions on financial management of your organisation. So agreeing the budget, setting the reserves policy, approving financial statements, overseeing internal controls and transparency. Ultimately, the board's responsible for submissions and audits to Charities Commission and or Companies House. We mentioned about CIC. I mean, that CIC 34 annual report, they are responsible for that, the submission for that. Financial risk and decisions on future costs should be set by the board and board meetings. And it all should be aware, I said, they're typically about £1 for personal liability, depending on how your organisation is set up. Some of this, as I said, it says in bold, the moment might be delegated to the CEO, but board is still legally responsible. The board might think that's the CEO's job. Now they'll ultimately do a lot of that work, but ultimately the board is still legally responsible for the above. We talked a little bit about strategy and strategic planning as well. So ultimately, the board is responsible to set the strategic direction of your organisation, of any organisation. We've got one at the Aston Villa Foundation. Happy to share our strategy within an email to you all. As brands and badges and everything changes, it looks a little bit different to this screenshot now. But we have got a 2024 to 2029 strategy, and it's something that myself, Neil, and everybody who works at the foundation literally comes to work for. every day, because the vision and the mission and our expectations of the charity is all set out in that strategy, and we eat, breathe, and sleep the strategy every single day. And that's what every employee should do. So, but ultimately, you may have a strategy in place now where there might not be relevant or adhering to your governing documents, or a bit different to where you once were or where you want to be. But ultimately, your strategy should ensure your activities are in line with your charitable objectives or your objectives as your organisation. And when you've got a strategy in place, is one of the biggest not mistakes or biggest downfalls of some organisation is strategic drift. It's so easy to look at an opportunity that's quite attractive away from your strategy or your blueprint, and go towards there, but that's completely different to what your organisation has set out to achieve in a strategy. So we, as the foundation, we have to change a little bit of our strategy in 2024, where we primarily want to work with more young people than adults. Even though I mentioned before we had to change our governing document to work with adults, we wanted to become more of a young people's charity in 2024, where we had to ensure that we're not looking for grants or opportunities to fund adult-based activities or provision, where we wanted to be seen as a young people's charity first of all, and we've had to kind of ensure that there's no strategic drift, because it's so easy to be drawn into opportunities and funding opportunities away from our main purpose and our main vision. Ultimately, it's always important to me, and Neil and I always talk about quite a lot about reviewing your strategy as you go along, performance, and evaluate, are we actually achieving what we set out to do. And this is obviously something that should be kind of board level conversations within your 10-point agenda, as I mentioned before. And how do you report it to your board? We always do a board report as such of highlights of the foundation within the last quarter, and that ultimately provides them not so much as an update, but in terms of top line kind of highlights of the organisation, which is obviously what your board want to hear, the good successes and everything that's fantastically going on the ground, not just the financial, the kind of issues or kind of issues that might be or concerns that are happening within the organisation. They want to hear about the good stuff as well. So a little bit of self-assessment again. That's a buzzword I've been saying quite a lot, but something to have a really think about your board. Do you have role descriptions? Are they up to date? When was the last time you did a skills audit? When's your next skills audit for your board? Date and last conflicts of interest form. That's something that should be completed. I think Neil's mentioned, I think about going back to strategy, there should be multiple year, 3 year to 5 years is normally quite a good one to look at. Make sure everything's documented, and from board to management, it's what huge responsibilities for what, and it's documented. Make sure you plan the board meetings. It sounds very straightforward, but make sure board meetings are planned in advance. Within the yearly, we're going to every quarter, and these are the dates it's going to be planned. It's in everyone's diaries, and there shouldn't be it should be agreed upon as meetings go along as well. Make sure you continue reviewing your vision, mission, and values. Identify board dates for review of risk register, which we'll talk about risk as we finish today. We will end on risk management, and a bit of awareness of deadlines for submissions that are statutory, really. So if you like your accounts or your reporting, if you're CIC, your annual report, or if it's a charity, your audits or your accounts, etc. So make sure deadlines are set in advance for that as well. Moving into, and I appreciate there's a lot of information being thrown at you within the last hour. Moving into policies and procedures. So this is actually how you operate. So it's catching up with me. So providing board members with structured environments for decision making, accountability, strategic planning, risk management, compliance, and communication. So these are the kind of policies and procedures that funders will look for, but also these are what you should have in place to operate as a secure and safe organisation. So really, there's probably wider than this, really, but these are the kind of the standard ones that we look at. So the safeguarding and welfare policies, what's your health and safety policy or procedures. The equality, diversity, inclusion is one that's relatively new, but really important for a lot of funders and organisations out there. We talked about conflict of interest policy. Make sure that's in post, so it's very clear that this is the policy of the organisation with conflict of interest. A staff and volunteer handbook, so staff are aware, volunteers are aware how your organisation operates and runs, and also one that's very relatively. It feels like it's recent, but it's actually been there a long time now in terms of GDPR. Once knows maybe data protection policies as well. Wider ones we could talk about maybe complaints policies, financial procedures, recruitment policy, the expenses policy, whistleblowing policy. There's a lot of policies. Again, if you need some advice with that, there is MV CEO that will do that. If you ever want to see a copy of the Aston Villa Foundations, that might be really good to circulate with you. These are our policies, and we have to make sure they're annually reviewed at board level. So it shouldn't just depend on activities. Don't have them for the sake of it. Again, don't just have policies that are stored in a folder and never looked at or reviewed or passed down or devolved down to staff. But ultimately, don't make them massively complicated. Make them very clear and concise and readable, because you don't want to send reels of paper to board or to staff up and down, really, to make sure that they're never going to read it because it's so long. I said NCVO have a really fantastic array of policies and free resources to download. We were happy to share ours as well from the foundation's point of view. As I said before, don't just copy and paste and put your badge at the top because I've ticked a box there. Make sure you definitely read through it, because ultimately you are going to be your expectations are going to match your policies. I've had one recently where I won't go to the organisation out of courtesy, but they were funded by us, and their safeguarding policy said they would do this in a certain instance. And then when an incident did occur and we kind of challenged them on it, they said we did this and we wasn't going to do this, even though their policy said they would do this. So ultimately, they wasn't really adhering to their own policies they had in place. So we had to kind of put them in a line situation and drew a line and say, this is what your policies say. This is how you should be reporting concerns within your sessions. So please, again, really make sure you eat, breathe and sleep your policies and procedures, and make sure all your staff members or your organisation are very much aware of your policies. We say we do it, good practice, we do it annually, but ultimately 2 to 3 years is something that funders do look for. It is getting tighter and tighter, especially with funders will look probably good practice to be yearly, to make sure that it is being signed by boards or directors. The policies should be signed, and if we did it yearly, it means they are being reviewed, so they'll take it seriously. Yeah, for example, as I mentioned, the safeguarding example, I said there, the staff and volunteers know what to do in certain situations, whether that's safeguarding or data protection, etc. Do they really want to know what to do? And the policy should outline step-by-step process and how to deal with certain situations. Again, I appreciate I am throwing a lot of information at you, but hopefully it is all relevant and is hitting home for a lot of you. Again, self-assessment, apologies, I have been talking about self-assessment quite a bit, but hopefully it is something that it's going to be really helpful. So look within your organisation, do you employ staff directly? Do you have staff contracts in place? That's really important. Employment law, tax liabilities for staff. Do you have volunteering policies, role descriptions for volunteers? Who supervises your volunteers? If you're buying in contractors or instructors from outside of the organisation, do you have their insurance documents, their risk assessments, their DBS, their relevant qualifications? Because ultimately they are going to be to follow your expectations and your example. So they should have mirrored kind of policies and insurance in place and DBS checks to make sure that you're operating safely, securely and lawfully as well. And also, is everyone in your organisation or outside your organisation who working under your name aware of all your policies and procedures? It's so important. When we have staff members here at the foundation, we have to go through a rigorous induction process to make sure that they are reading and signing the policies that they're going to literally adhere to on the ground or within the workplace. Again, we will send examples. There's the transparency and honesty from our side. We're happy to share our policies with anyone and with everyone who wants to see them. So please let us know if you ever want that as part of the slide deck that's going to be going around. As I said before, MVCO are very good and got some fantastic templates to start from in terms of building new policies and procedures in your organisation. Good to know that the last section is risk management. I believe the best to last. So just going through, so we got to massively important, and as I said at the start of the workshop, don't just see risk management as we're just delivering safe sessions or safe sports sessions on the ground and we've made it safe for young people or participants to attend. This risk management is about your organisation rather than the delivery on the ground. So ultimately, what is risk? Risk management is about identifying, assessing and mitigating threats or uncertainties that could affect your organisation. So there's 5 kind of the Charities Commission identifies 5 key areas of risk. That's governance, as we've spoken about today. Whether you've got your governance in place and it's watertight and it's very clear and concise. There's operational risk. We talked about sessions on the ground and make sure there's risk assessments in place, and every kind of operation that you're delivering is covered through a risk assessment or risk management process. There's your financial risk. We talked a little bit about asset locks today in terms of what happens if funders will look at asset lock. What happens if there's your company's at risk of going under or ceasing operation? What happens to the finances within that? Ultimately, what happens in general, the landscape away from you. We need to be looking at, we had COVID, didn't we, before, and that's a massive financial risk for a lot of organisations. Coming with COVID was 6 years ago, but it feels like it was yesterday, where there's a lot of risk involved around organisations, around a lot of operations had to cease, and that caused a massive financial risk for a lot of organisations. That kind of adheres to a little bit of external as well, external circumstances. And ultimately compliance with law and regulation. Are we meeting the legal and regulatory requirements to operate lawfully as an organisation? It's and the slides are catching up with what my mind is at the moment. Here we go. In terms of governance, this is as everybody talked about today. Inappropriate or ineffective organisation structure. Your board may lack skills or commitments. Your board might be dominated by individuals. Conflicts of interest across your board. You might be delivering activities outside your charitable or governing documents objects. You may have poor reporting to board and trustees. Neil mentioned before about a lot of funders do look at Companies House or Charities Commission around if you're late at submitting files, and that just flag up on the system. And if you are, then a lot of funders will look at that and thinking, well, there's a lot of poor practice in this organisation, so we might not fund this because they may misuse or may not adhere to what they're going to say for the funding will provide. A little bit about operational. As I said before, this is probably one that everyone's minds go to when you think of risk management for your organisation. There is not just easy to go into sport in our world, but it's wider than sport. There's office space or activity spaces for your staff. There could be a complete computer and IT system failure, but all your documents or important information is stored. That could happen, massive risk for your organisation. Health and safety of staff and beneficiaries, as I said before, around injuries and making sure there's appropriate first aid training or DBS checks as well, safeguarding training for all your staff members. Some of your staff members might be lone workers. How do we make them safe and participants safe through lone working policies? We've had to do that very recently at the foundation, where we've gone more into kind of mentoring services on a one-to-one basis with mental health or kind of the young people services that we are into. So make sure we've got a lone working policy in place to make sure they're safe and also participants safe when doing so. Yeah, we're looking at service provision. beneficiary dissatisfaction is a massive risk. That if people stop coming to your organisation because of X, Y, and Z, and maybe the quality of service is not there, so they stop coming. So what happens to the organisation financially then because of an operational issue or risk that's not being resolved? If you're not meeting targets or KPIs of your funders, there's contract risks as well. There could be breach of contracts or funding could be pulled. You could be taking on work outside your expertise, not equipped to deliver it properly. So that becomes reputational risk for future opportunities or big stakeholders that you're attached to or receiving funding from. And ultimately, there's within a risk register, which we'll talk about towards the end of this, you need to think about how you put things in place if staff leave or volunteers leave, or there's a constant turnover of staff. That could use a huge operational risk, and you want to be able to deliver towards contracts or key performance indicators, as I mentioned before, that funders are looking for. Moving on to finance. As I said before, we touched upon it a little bit within operation, but the examples of financial risks could be a reduction or loss of funding. What happens to your organisation then? Budgetary control and financial reporting not done effectively. As I said before, if you're not submitting accounts in time or your organisation's not tracking your budgets or financial controls, you might be overspending in budgets. If you're not having budgetary reviews done either kind of CEO or departmental manager level or budget or board level, you could be overspending and ultimately could put the organisation at risk. You could have a lack of reserves. You have to have a set amount of reserves for a charity, for example. Here at the foundation, we have to have at least 6 months worth of wages to cover the cost of everyone at the foundation. So we have to build up reserves to do so and have that minimum threshold. You might have cash flow difficulties. You might have grants or income streams come to an end and you've not sustained those contracts. What happens to staff then? What happens to the organisation as a whole? We're 10 years ago at the foundation, we relied a lot of Premier League funding into communities. We relied really on that source of income. But actually, we had to diversify our kind of streams of income to make sure that as a charity, we could grow safely and sustain our operation away from just relying on one source of income. It could be that your pricing policies, you might be charging for your services and it might be too high or not adhering to competitors out there, or might not be charging enough. That could come with a financial risk as well. And you might have compliance issues with grant imposed restrictions that you might breach, and that might cause financial risk if you can't fulfill contracts, etc. And there could be mismanagement, fraud, or human error. It's that's something that can trip a lot of organisations up as well. Looking external, as I mentioned before, we had COVID not too long ago. There could be force majeure, which is a fantastic word, but that could be acts of human nature. There could be a fire. There could be COVID 2.0. There could be a lot of things that we need to kind of mitigate risk of what happens if this happens, or what happens if this happens. It could be external kind of reputational risk or perceptions out there if you're not fulfilling services or operating at a certain level or expectations or something you set out to achieve. There might be a change in government policy. We've had a different government recently. That could affect income at certain levels. Competitors in your sector could increase in levels, and that could take work away from yourselves, or you have to kind of change. As I said before, maybe you have to change your power to scale in terms of services you want to kind of outline to your partners or stakeholders. Because there's increasing competitors, you probably know out there, it's really difficult to get grant funding at the moment. That's why it's so important to have everything in place we've mentioned today to put yourself in the best situation to receive grant funding. Because funders, as I said before, are looking at ways to not fund you because it's such a competitive process. So please adhere to everything we mentioned today and really research into how do I really make my organisation the best it could possibly be to be attractive for funders. And then compliance. If you don't report on time, late filing, as I mentioned before, you may have a lack of understanding of taxation, lack of understanding about employment law and rights, or you're not operating towards what you set out to do in your constitution or governing documents, whether that's a memorandum or an articles association as well. Last things for today. I hope everyone's still with me, because it is, as I said, it can be a very dry subject. At the same time, it could be quite interesting and relevant for your organisation. A little bit of a self-assessment to go away from today. As we've done across every topic we've talked about. When was the last time you reviewed your risk assessments? We have to do ours every year, every September, along with academic years. But ultimately, if circumstances have changed, whether that's a different venue or we've had some different kind of beneficiaries that are attending, it could be the high risk factors like mental health or disabilities, or we want to make our programs a bit more inclusive and invite more people from different realms of society to be involved. So we always have to constantly review our risk assessments. Do you have a risk policy or risk register for your organisation? I would do one for, as I mentioned, probably the different types of risk in terms of governance, operational, finance, external compliance, and have a watertight risk assessment that's reviewed at board level. When was the last time you did one review, if you've ever done one before? If not, again, talk about templates galore, but there is templates for risk management, self-assessments within the Charities Commission. There's a link here which I'll pop to you all on the chat today to have a look and research some really good templates to really self-assess your organisation through risk management. As I said, quarterly reviews is a really good way to risk manager. I think was part of the 10-point plan, as I mentioned before, to really review that risk register on a quarterly basis to make sure that there's no new risks, or you're mitigating the risks that you said you were, and you're keeping on track of the large list of risk management responsibilities for your organisation. Again, make sure it's shared with trustees and boards at meetings, and especially if you've noticed or foreseeing significant risks that are coming in the future for your organisation. Summary, some takeaways today, and hopefully it has been very useful for you all, at least taking something away to consider for your organisation. Again, these are going to be sent on a slide deck for you. If you want more in-depth support from ourselves, please reach out to myself or Neil. It's not just ourselves. We've got an infrastructure of people who are very experienced within this area. We've got a compliance manager, we've got a funding and grants manager. We've got our head of foundation as well, who's very experienced. Obviously, Neil's our relationships manager, and he's got 30 years experience at the council as well, who is an array of knowledge in so many different areas. So please reach out if you want that in-depth support, whether to myself or through Claire, and we'll do our best to kind of meet to talk about everything we've gone through today and wider reaches as well. So a few takeaways: is your structure still appropriate for you and your ambitions? Again, if so, perhaps consider a review of your governing document, your objects, your board numbers, your dissolution or asset lock, your reserves policy, etc. If you're considering changing, get proper legal and financial advice. Don't just take it off James's workshop today or slides that are sent out. Get some really, as I said, short-term pain of having to finance that could be really long-term gain for you if you get the right legal structured advice and financial advice. Review your board meetings. Are they efficient? Are they serving the purpose that you want them to do? Are they directors or board members or committee clear about their roles, responsibilities and liabilities? Do you have the skills necessary to grow your organisation and maintain your organisation to where you want to be? Check your conflict of interest and attendance and performance of your board as well. Looking at your strategic vision, missions and values, are they still relevant? Have you got them in place? Are they in line with your objects, with your governing document? Have you drifted away from that maybe in recent years and maybe want to get back on track? Is your performance and progress reported to the board, or how is it your performance and progress reported back to the board? Do you have the right policies in place? Do you need some support with them? Please reach out. Do you have or do you or people know about the processes from staff members to volunteers all the way up to board level? are you aware of the responsibilities across all your organisation as well, whether that's job descriptions or volunteering descriptions that go out to your organisation? Make sure you look at risk. It's really important. It's not just an activity; it's something that should be extremely seriously taken across all your organisation to make sure you're safe and secure, and will potentially aid to your growth in the future. And make sure you have an organisation risk register. Download those templates. They're there for a reason. They're there to support you. I'm sure you all do amazing work out there in your communities across the West Midlands, and hopefully today has been something that helps either reinsure that you're doing the right things. You may have learned something. You may have something you want to take on to the next stages of your organisation. This has been really useful. I hope it has. Carry on all the amazing work that you are doing. Again, we'll share out all the templates we adhere to and we use. We'll share them to you, and hopefully this last hour and a half nearly has been really useful for you.
Wowzers, James, thank you. So, couple of things from me. One is all the way through James's slides, there was little self-assessment slides on each of the areas. As and when, have a little look at those and have a little talk with your committees, your directors, perhaps using those self-reviews. It is an awful lot of information. And remember, as part of this Power Up Community Sport programme, you can get some mentoring at the end of this on a topic of your choice. So if this area, as we go through each of the presentations and the workshops, you might think, oh, I think I might need to do my mentoring in this area with some of the Aston Villa Foundation employees who are very skilled and knowledgeable. Loved Neil's input as well. And then, so remember there's the mentoring that you can take up. And the one thing that made me giggle a little bit, I think it was Vicky earlier on said, I love this stuff around governance and structures, but my board hate it. So, you know, so maybe that's something to take away from this, that, you know, we looked earlier in the presentation at what gaps we've got on committees and boards and whatnot. You know, there might be a parent or a member of the club out there that loves this stuff and is good at it. And would be really happy to help their daughter's club or their son's club with policies and procedures and things like that. And there's no shame in popping a shout out on a WhatsApp group and saying, anybody interested in this stuff, does anybody, because there might be somebody out there that is really good and could be a real asset to your board and your committee. But yes, thank you, James, that was amazing. And I can't believe you fitted all of that information into an hour and a half. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a sore throat now. I have got a sore throat now.
Drink of water, drink of water. Are there any questions out there before we lose James? Just at 1 o'clock, we're coming up to 1 o'clock. So if there's any questions that you want to throw out there, I will circulate the presentation and a recording, and I also now have the recording of the first one, the planning and strategy presentation, so that will be coming out to you in the next day or so as well. I just had trouble downloading that, so we will be sending recordings and everything as we go along. So if there are, I've got a new message popped up. Oh, Jed's offered his support as well. And has popped an email and a telephone number. So Jed is the project manager at Cradley Heath Community Link, also does a lot of this, and you keep your board in check as well, don't you, Jed? As part of his role. So a couple of offers of assistance there. But if there are no other questions, shout now. But James?
Yes, hi everyone. And as I said, I'm no expert in this by any means, and please use his network. As I said, it doesn't have to come straight to me, or I think Jed seems like he's got some fantastic experience as well. So it's great that you've popped that on the chat as well, Jed. So thank you for that. You may have, I'm sure Claire, you might share contacts with everyone so I can send slides out today. Apologies if you're not Birmingham based, but we have got an opportunity coming up soon in line with the Euro 2028 that's going to be arriving in Birmingham in the next few years. And the next 2 years, we're going to be providing £5,000, 21 grants, £5,000 each for sport, arts and culture in the city. So if you are city based in Birmingham, apologies if you're not, we appreciate your wider reach to West Midlands. I will add it to our distribution list if you want us to learn about that experience when it does land in the autumn onwards.
Thank you very much. I'm just stopping the recording there.